Hello, and welcome to That Booty, the channel where we approach the spiritual world with curiosity and discernment. And today we're going to approach how to get out of victim mentality or victim consciousness. A good place to start is to explore what we mean by victim consciousness. It is a construct of the ego that keeps you in familiar patterns, in the status quo, even if it's something that you don't really want, because the ego does not like change, even if it states different desires, right? And what is an easy way for the ego to justify staying in the same patterns? It's to label itself as the victim, as the helpless victim of circumstance, the non-empowered being who has no control over what happens to them. So how can we shift away from this? A good place to start is to internalize the concept that everything that happens is happening for you, not to you. I'll say it again. Everything that comes to pass in your life is happening for you, not to you. What does this mean? Every circumstance is an opportunity, regardless of how difficult it may seem, to grow as a person. You can grow through joy, through opening the heart chakra, by taking in the awe that life has to offer. But you can also grow from pain, from grief, from struggle, by learning how to not only respond to these situations, but how to act in a way that is to your ultimate benefit, even through difficult circumstance. Now, you might think this is one of those brain rewiring things where you just become relentlessly optimistic. But I would argue that instead of becoming optimistic, you become empowered. So when something happens or when something doesn't happen and you feel like you have no power in that situation, you can start to think of the little ways you can alter your approach in order to change the narrative. For example, if you've been searching for a job and nothing seems to have come to pass yet, yes, it helps to have a positive outlook, but it's not just optimism. You take empowered action. You keep applying, you keep searching, you keep talking about what your goals are, where you want to be employed, spreading the word. And if you keep going without saying, oh, it'll never happen, the world's against me, you keep going instead of feeling like that, and you keep learning. Maybe you start developing a new skill on the side. Maybe you begin interacting with new people. See it all as an opportunity instead of as an obstacle. Additionally, when it comes to victim mentality, we need to realize when there are external influences in our lives that may be contributing to that victim mentality. So there may be individuals who feed that little voice inside your head that says, you know, you can't, or you'll never, or whatever it is, however this negativity manifests, this victim voice. There are certain people who feed that voice. And so going back to being empowered, how can you take empowered action against external influence bringing you back into victim consciousness? And that's up to you. And that's something that I suggest you meditate on. Because some people, for example, if you are in a toxic relationship, you may want to step back from that relationship and regroup. If it's somebody that you feel may have good intentions, maybe having a conversation will shift the dynamic. But here is where you learn to tune into your intuition and take empowered action with your relationships as well. Because your environment does play a role on how much of a victim you feel like, or how empowered you feel. And ultimately, your goal, or a goal, is to be surrounded by people who seek the same level of empowerment within themselves as you do within yourself, and you can all come together and lift each other up in this way. Now, speaking of others, there are people who seek to take advantage or even to harm. But even in those situations, you have the power to choose how you respond. And actually, I believe it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, you can only be ridden if your back is bent. So somebody else's words and actions don't really determine who you are unless you bend over and allow that burden, onto your back. Nobody else can control you unless you give up your power, unless you see yourself as the victim, as the lesser being in that situation. And the last thing that I'd like to talk about regarding victim consciousness is discomfort. We often tell ourselves that when we experience discomfort, that, oh, I gotta step back now. It's too much. Can't handle it. I'll never get past this. This is, I tried and it's not working out. This hurts too much. This is too much effort. Whatever it may be. But discomfort is an indicator of change. And keep in mind what we said before, victim consciousness is trying to keep the ego, right, in this comfortable status quo of repeating patterns. When you're uncomfortable, it shows that you're ready to kind of shift out of that. And whether it's by choice, for example, with your health, right? If you're exercising and, oh, it's too uncomfortable, my body's sore, I can't do it. That's usually when people say, I can't do it. This is just how my body is. But it's actually 9 times out of 10. Of course, listen to your own inner voice more than anything. But there's a difference between your inner voice and your ego trying to prevent this change, prevent this growth. But when you get to that point, right, 9 times out of 10, it's just your body adjusting to the changes you started to implement. And if you resist those changes when discomfort arises, if you say, you know what, I want to go back, you'll never grow. Now, sometimes it's an external thing that causes discomfort. For example, you might have a health crisis where you have to seek medical care. Now, this is something that can be hard to see beyond the lens of victim consciousness, but when you have a health crisis, it is your body speaking to you. Either saying now is a time to readjust to the new circumstances of your physical being, or now is a time to analyze how this condition or the situation got to this level, and make the necessary changes to come back to a place of balance and of nourishment. So either way, however change happens, it's going to cause discomfort. And victim consciousness will resist the change and justify the discomfort as a reason for you to step back and say, you know what, things are happening to me and I can't do anything about it. So, you know, if my body wasn't this way, I would be ripped. But my body's weak, so I can't. Or, you know, well, I'd be more conscious of what I'm eating. But, you know, it's really, really difficult when you have X condition. Right? We can always say something's happening to me. I have no power here. But when you say it's happening for me, you begin to see the situation differently and empower yourself to respond in a way that leads you towards growth. So I hope that all of you watching this video are able to transcend victim consciousness whenever it appears, and to remain in the energy of empowerment regardless of the difficulty that presents itself in your experience. Until next time, namaste.